Okay, everyone, thank you all for being here. My name is David Bender, and I'm the Director of Grants here at PCF. I'm here with my team members, Rebecca Hughes, who's our grants manager, Doug, the CEO, Doug, and then Rosa Cervantes, our program officer. So I'm sure all of you know why we're here. We are currently working with the City of St. Petersburg on distributing some ARPA funding, the American Rescue Plan Act. The purpose of this chunk of funding is to create a shared services organization, which will provide direct services to help nonprofits strengthen their infrastructure so that their service delivery is stronger, because we see so much how when administrative capacity is tested, service delivery can suffer, and so can the sanity of all the nonprofits team members. So today is technically part 2 of the application process, where interviews will be taking place. Only so much can come through an application. So we thought it would be better when we designed this process to have people come in person and talk and learn more about what each applicant can offer as if they were to be chosen for this program. So we received 2 written applications. Both applicants are here today, Catalyst Consulting Services and then the Hypatia Collaborative. And before we get started, I'll say that we want to reiterate the intent, which is the SSO is to provide direct services to the nonprofits in St. Pete, specifically those that are smaller and with low infrastructure. The SSO is meant to represent the community they're serving, so to look and feel like St. Pete. And the SSO should really have had past experience doing this kind of work. So we'll get started with the committee members introducing themselves. You can say your name, your role in the community, however you want to define it, and then you could just affirm that you have no conflicts of interest with either of the applicants. So we can go this way.
My name is Demetrius Taylor. I'm out here because I am the board treasurer for the Will.
Yes.
And I have no conflict of interest.
Great.
My name is Ellen McDonald. I'm the CEO of Florida Resurrection House, and I have no conflict with either applicant.
I'm Carrie Boucher, the Executive Director of Nomad Studio, and no conflict of interest.
Jennifer Yeagley, CEO, St. Pete Free Clinic, no conflicts with either organization.
Good morning, I'm Darla O'Shea Murphy, the CEO of Girls Inc. of Pinellas County, and I have no conflict of interest.
And Darla will also be chairing this committee. I should have let's define that.
Hi, Elisa Funzel Randall. I'm the managing director for the mayor's office of the city for communications and community engagement. And I have no conflicts with this with either.
Great. So before we get started into the actual interviews, we wanted to give time for any public comment that is not on the agenda. So anything not related to the interviews. This is also to those that are watching virtually. If you raise your hand, you can provide public comment. Again, this is for items not on the agenda, so not related to the application or interviews. So we'll give maybe the time for anyone to raise their hand. Okay, I think we will get started then. Darla, do you want to take it away?
Sure, so good morning, and thank you so much, not only for being here this morning, but for all of the work that you and your team put in to prepare this application. This portion of the application is something that the committee worked on. And so the questions that I'm going to ask you are a compilation of what we all individually came away with after reviewing your application and the work that you did. Please keep in mind that we kind of teased out the amount of time that we have over the entire interview and landed on 5 minutes to answer each question. And so after I ask the question, the timer is going to begin. So please keep that in mind. PCF was kind enough to set the timer for us. So again, I'm going to thoroughly ask the question, and as soon as you start speaking, the timer will begin. If you go over that 5 minutes, it's going to be taken away at the end of the interview. So do your very best to keep within that 5-minute time limit. Any questions? All right, let's do it. That's our first question. Please clarify how you will identify nonprofit clients and what criteria you will use to select nonprofit organizations to receive your support.
To start, my name is Chris Cook. I'm the leader of the marketing team, and we are going to leverage our existing relationships with organizations and funders that are engaged with nonprofit leaders. Those such as Nonprofit Leadership Foundation for a Healthy St. Pete, Pinellas County Foundation, of course, United Way Suncoast, and a host of others. Our team will always use an assessment process to determine the needs of each, and if that organization is ready, able to receive the support and to what level that support will be provided to them. In addition, as outlined in our marketing plan, we will engage with influencers and media outlets specific to the designated populations that those nonprofits serve.
Great, and I'm gonna take that as well. I'm Sarah Lindsay, and I'm the research lead. Our goal is not to be restrictive, but we know that we can't be all things to all nonprofits. So there are some qualifiers that we'll have to have in place naturally. The biggest qualifier that we have seen in prior experience is engagement from the organization at all levels and interest in the process. From the very onset. So we'll often do a webinar to kick off the process, to talk through the process and to answer any questions. We have an FAQ page that will answer questions there. We try to be very transparent and very accessible. So that seeing who takes advantage of that is very telling of how they're going to move forward with this process in later stages. There's two areas of qualification. There's the viability of the participating in the SSO, and then there's what actual services they'll need from the SSO. So there's kind of two pockets there, and Eric has coined this broad term: ready, able, and willing. And in this case, we look at organizations and determine, are they ready? Meaning, are they showing the commitment to take part in this process from all levels of the organization? It's not just being driven by the CEO, it's not just being driven by an individual staff member, but we're really seeing engagement and questions from all levels. Are they able? So do they have the capacity to assess their organizational structures, protocols, and processes? Those protocols and processes don't have to be perfect, but there has to be something in place as a starting point that we can help and engage and build upon. And then willing, are they willing to engage and have vulnerable conversations about the status of their organization, what their real needs are, and to really help us unveil their organizational needs moving forward. Some examples that we have used as qualifiers in the past that kind of roll into this overall perception of or view of whether they're ready, able, and willing. It could be the tenure of the organization. It doesn't have to be a set number of years. Turnover within the organization, whether they have a board of directors and whether they're active, whether they have some sort of sustainability where they're talking about sustainability and the sustainability measures aren't in place, having an EIN. But we really look at the big picture of the organization at the front end when we're doing our qualification.
Anything else? Thank you.
And I just realized, if we could, you all introduce yourself super quick, just the name, role within the organization, no spiel. Just, yeah, quickly.
We were gonna offer that, but we didn't want to. So, Christy, you want to start?
Yes.
Okay, so my name is Michelle Turman. I'm the CEO and founder of Catalyst Consulting Services. We were founded, as you all know, in 2014, based on the need I saw as a CEO, actually in Pinellas County and support services. So this is our team. We do want to point out, to be fair, with somebody that is recovering from a lost voice. She's an amazing rock star, and we have a pretty deep bench strength in our team. We did have our grant writer. I know you're familiar with our team. Her husband had open heart surgery 2 days ago. Is in intensive care. So we've asked one of our other grant writers to sit in who can answer any questions, although I'm not sure they'll pertain, but thank you, Sharon, for being here. We've got others in the back if there's any other questions that come up.
My name is Chris Cook. I oversee the marketing department for Catalyst.
Eric Smith, I oversee the cultural competence elements as well as community engagement.
Sarah Lemonade, research and evaluation.
Samantha Abraham, accounting lead. And I'm Sharon Kennedy from Families to Grow.
And David, we probably should say for those who are listening in that these questions were provided to the team in advance.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Can I just say, I have a hearing impairment, so just awareness of that. There's some noise coming in and I'm understanding everything, but just knowing that would be
Would it
helpful.
help to sit closer on this side or?
No,
Just wanna make
I'm good here, but just for your awareness,
Okay.
that would
And
be
then-
helpful to me.
So maybe those that are here, we have some other people from our team. I know in the audience, could you just maybe speak up? Maybe introduce yourself, Jean, Ian, Jessica?
Absolutely. Ian Edwards, Director of Sales and Marketing, Canacon IT, Wincott. I'm Gene Powell, President CEO of Canacon.
I'm Jessica Valdez Scheller, CPA. I am a consultant and I provide accounting services to nonprofits in.
Yeah, I have a quick question. The time, is the time that, if we have time left over for one question, can you get that at the back end or is that kind of long?
I think it's gone.
Oh,
all right, are we ready? So number 2, please share how your initial organizational assessment can be scaled or modified to serve small grassroots nonprofits who may lack the infrastructure to report or engage at the level you initially outlined.
That's me again, so I will do my best to project. Thank you for sharing that. So I realize I appreciate this question because I think maybe our asks on paper came across as more demanding than in reality. So I appreciate the opportunity to clarify that. Our main goal is always to meet organizations where they are. So we don't want to be a burden to the organization. We don't want to be a taxation on their time, knowing that there is some additional time that would be involved in this, but we want to help, not hinder, right? So I'd like to break down the 3 areas of evaluation and talk about them maybe a little bit more clearly. So the first is the intake process. So that is where we are capturing their self-rated proficiency and their self-identified needs. Could be marketing, brand equity, community awareness, fundraising, governance, human resources, strategic planning, IT. So say, for example, they say that they need some support in strategic planning. So then we do a deep dive into strategic planning. Do they have a strategic plan? Not a requirement to qualify, but this is just information that we're gathering to understand the big picture of their organization. Do they have a strategic plan? How often do they look at it? How often do they revisit it? Are there metrics that are tied to it? How do they go about this? So again, this is giving us a big picture so that if we have a multitude of organizations that are applying for support, we can kind of filter down and look at, okay, this is an area of support where they've identified a need, but they're really far along on the continuum. So let's look at another area that they identified a need and address that because we have the capacity to do so. So that's the questions that are tied to organizational proficiency would be repeated every 6 months by the organization. So we're getting them to rate themselves and how proficient they see their organization being over time on these same things that we're addressing, that we're working on. So it's not a time-intensive task. It's every 6 months, an online check-in survey for that particular item. The second level is the interviews. So would definitely be a CEO interview. With the smaller organizations, it may only be a CEO, it may only be a one-person operation. So that would be the person that we do the interview with. For scaling, as we look at larger organizations, just the frequency, the count of interviews would increase based on the number of people that are working with the SSOs. And where these interviews differ from the survey is that the intake survey is that these interview questions, it's a 30-minute conversation via phone or via Zoom. where we're talking through the process of working with us as the SSO. How are we meeting their expectations? Are there areas that we're falling below their expectations? We want to know that every 6 months. We don't want to know that at the end in a post-assessment, because we want to be able to make changes. And then the third level is the peer conversation, the peer roundtable conversations. So that is something that we have found, it's not required, this is not a required area of participation for the organizations, but we found so much value. The organizations that have participated in them in the past have told us that it's the most valuable part of the process. In that they get FaceTime with other CEOs that are participating in the SSO. One of the suggestions actually that came out of interviews from when we did the Tampa Bay Equity Incubator, we had CEO roundtables, and the ask and conversations that we had throughout that process was, you know, the staff members that are involved in this process, they would really like their own peer group. So this is us taking that recommendation, those thoughts into account and making active change. So we never want to set a rigid process that would overwhelm progress. So really the scaling part comes in the counts of these activities and things that are happening.
Anything else? There's 35.
I think the idea of this also is to walk alongside the organization. And I'll get into the next question, but the idea really is the more that you know about the organization, what they do, who they are, you have a greater propensity to be able to walk alongside them, providing the feedback that they need or want in real time, and be able to be in kind of a constant assessment process as to what's needed to ensure that you're providing the best possible set of resources.
Thank you. And so the next question, can you provide a snapshot of what you anticipate the typical day-to-day client experience would look like once a client is actively working with you after the initial assessment?
So I'll talk to this one, and the day-to-day client experience is going to be absolutely awesome. But with that in mind, really because this is a very personal kind of situation. So when you're talking about nonprofits, it's very much so mission, vision, and value driven. So there's a big value proposition when it comes to engaging in the community, giving up your time to work with the clients that you have. So the idea of it for us is that there's going to be a designated and committed coach that's walking alongside the organization. This coach is going to have access to all the subject matter experts. We're going to leverage a process that we call your message is only as credible as your messenger. So we'll have credible messengers. And what I mean by that is that a message can get distorted based upon who the messenger is. If the messenger doesn't align with who the organization is, sometimes it could be demographic kind of alignment. It could be value alignment. But we want to ensure, because of the assessment process that we've gone to, because we're going to be immersive in getting to know the organization, that we match the right type of coach, the right type of messenger to that particular organization. So what that looks like day to day is that constant kind of connectivity and feedback to know what you need in the moment, to make sure that the right subject matter experts are being engaged at the right time, delivering the right message. So that could very easily look like, okay, we're coming in, so what's going on right now? Well, we gotta get this big marketing push out here. So, okay, we have the marketing plan in place based upon what the assessment gave you. What specifics do you need to get done now? Well, we worked on this path based upon this particular marketing strategy and this particular marketing plan, and we need, certain elements that we just don't have. Okay, well, we're here to get it done, so we're going to bring in our marketing expertise to be able to help out with that particular process and continue to drive along. The way that the assessment is done, they're going to get a strategy implementation plan along with that as post-assessment, and we're going to stick pretty close with that, tracking the goals that have been set, and these are going to be SMART goals that are associated with those to ensure that we're moving along the path. But that's kind of very individualistic, walking by your side type coach is going to be available at all points in the process. Anybody else want to add to that a little bit?
Thank you. Number 4, how will you maintain a similar ethic and model of service across all vendors pertaining to communication, timelines, client respect, diversity training, and billing practices?
I think I'm going to take a portion of this and then I'm also going to hand it to my colleague Sam. So the way in which we sort of maintained our mission since we were founded in 2014, that we trademark is, we're here to facilitate positive change for an organization. So we've not found that there's any industry, nonprofit industry, regardless of size, operating budget, demographic, or where they land in the organizational cycle. Every nonprofit that I've seen actually wants to create and facilitate a positive impact in their community. So we start there. We've rarely found anybody that varies from that. With every single service that we provide, whether it is executive searches and we have DEI inclusion statements, things of that nature, we've got best practices aligned with all the services that will be outlined. In terms of communication timelines, we're going to start, as Sarah said, with an assessment. And then after that, we're going to customize a project management timeline for each client. That really helps us from the standpoint of what are the deliverables that we've agreed upon, the benchmarks for success, who's the champion that will be interfacing for the types of services that they need for the client, but also who's the champion on our team. So we're very clear on who the touch point is. At that time, we meet with the client, we review that timeline, make sure that are there any things that are going to prohibit us from meeting these deliverables based on a certain time of the year, or maybe other things that are occurring. Because again, we have to meet them where they're at. We can't push them to move forward if they have certain times of the year where they're more busy, it's during an event season, things of that nature. So from that standpoint, we have the client sign off. That's really important because we need them to have buy-in in what we're accomplishing together. We need to establish a baseline of accountability so that we can continue to move forward in the process. So that's what we do in terms of the communication timelines. In terms of the diversity training, I want to kind of attack this from two different sides. I know our resumes were included as attachments, but I think another thing in terms of internally in our team, many of us have various certificates in diversity, equity, inclusion training, a variety of different types of training. So I want to point that out internally. Of course, we always have our cultural competency lead. So if there's anything that we may encounter with an audience that we've not encountered before, we can handle that internally. In terms of externally, if there's any type of cultural competency training, that is something that we can look at with our clients. We know in St. Pete, the three main audiences are going to be Hispanic, African American, and Caucasian, based on some of the studies that we've seen. So we feel fully equipped with the team that's here and our bench strength to accomplish that. But from that part, I want to move to Sam to talk a little bit about the billing practices.
I also want to say, to tack on to that training piece, is that we are all lifelong learners. So that's one of our core values as well. So what training we need, that we self-identify or feedback we receive, is going to be very important to us as a team. In terms of our billing practices as an SSO, just like we are externally committed to best practices, we are also internally committed to best practices. We have arrived and established protocols internally. As vendors and consultants, we have also agreed upon a standard rate across all of our services, except for any legal services that we might need. We have agreed upon budgets. And just like we have a champion to each client and a coach for each client, we are also going to have an internal budget for each of these clients based on the assessments and the timelines that are given. We're going to have a standard practice for our timekeeping, not only based on any of the grant requirements, but also based on the metrics we are going to use to evaluate our services. And on a monthly basis, we are going to take a look at our time and budget versus actual from our time commitment, and also a cost perspective internally, and also what that looks like for the grant and potentially in the future, knowing that this is something that's going to extend beyond 3 years, what that might look like for organizations post grant funding period. Thank you.
I also want to make sure it's clear that we're not going to be, this is not an exclusive to anyone. With this is very inclusive. We understand intersectionality and that there's going to be multiple dimensions of diversity within organizations, within leaders. We just want to be sure that we're capturing the idea that we're going to be extremely closely connected with each organization to make sure we're validating lived experiences and understand their trajectory in terms of their mission, vision, values, and how it relates to the work that we do. Just want to make sure that these things are connecting in throughout the process.
Thank you. Number 5. How do you define and measure success for your organization's efforts in supporting nonprofits?
Our evaluation process has essentially been established to do this. So our intake process gives us self-reporting information from the organization, so we see how they see themselves and where they sit currently. Repeating that every 6 months tells us how they're improving, how they're shifting, how are we helping them? Because if we're not, then we need to go back and do something different, right? And the second part, the interviews with CEOs, with leads, with staff members, anyone who's engaging with the SSOs, those are the feedback points that are telling us as an SSO, how are we operating? How are we meeting expectations? Are we falling below in some areas? Are we exceeding in some areas? Do we need to look at how we're describing what we do and the services that we provide? Do we need to seek additional partners to provide services? Is there something that we're seeing repeatedly come up in the nonprofit needs that we're not able? I can't imagine anything that we wouldn't need to put the serve with this team. But you don't know until you ask. And so we ask again, every 6 months, we have these conversations with the individuals. So we're getting, again, feedback on improvement, process improvement, as well as SSO process improvement. We have to set expectations for ourselves to be able to move the needle and to incite change, but without asking the questions in a consistent format and asking them over time, we really would have no way of knowing how we're doing. So this is our approach in doing that.
Additionally, we kind of take a look at it from, we have kind of what we call a belt and suspenders approach when it comes to doing assessing. So we have surveying, we have some anecdotal information, whether that's surveys, focus groups, things like that, as well as the data that we're getting from self-reporting to be able to help us understand what does this all look like comprehensively, what is the strategy going forward, and how do we measure on a consistent basis to ensure that we're hitting the mark. One of the more important pieces to this is that with that culture, that constant kind of feedback. What's happened? Has something changed within your industry? Has something changed within your organization? Are you seeing a lot of people exit for some reason? What is actually happening? So then if we need to pivot, we have the opportunity to do that in real time. So again, it's connecting the dots that with many organizations and, being a small business myself, being a former banker, understand that things change. They can start changing rapidly, and it can also create panic. So in many cases, some of you around the room talking, so sometimes you're having somewhat of an exodus. How does that work? You're having trouble connecting in with a certain population. Sorry, I talk fast, I get excited in the Northeast, it does happen, trying to slow down. But the idea of it is, we want to make sure that we're listening, that we're hearing, and also bringing external feedback, like, hey, we know that you're engaged with this population. We're seeing a shift industry-wise here. Are you capturing that? What does that look like? How is your feedback? How is your data coming through that identifies this potential challenge that we're seeing that's arising, based upon either public opinion or just what's shifting in the industry. So all of these multiple touch points allow us to engage in real time, very authentically, based upon what's happening. And so that feedback that continuous loop allows us to really engage with clients of varying sizes, whether this organization has 3,000 people or 1. So we have the ability to scale up and down based upon what the needs of the organization are. It's always going to be based upon what the needs of the organization over what we think is what they actually need to have happen. Many times these type of situations is prescriptive, but this is about, our perspective never is going to outweigh your experience. Your lived experience trumps our perspective. We're going to be there to add our subject matter expertise based upon your lived experiences and where you're trying to take your organization. So again, just want to make sure that these pieces are kind of tying in and connecting.
Anything else? Thank you. And so number 6. The proposal states that Catalyst is minority owned. Can you provide some perspective on if or how this connects to Catalyst supporting culturally diverse nonprofits and specifically those in St. Petersburg?
So I'll take this one. In terms of the fact that since I'm the person that, runs the company, oversees the company. It's interesting when we looked at this question, because when I was looking at the various statistics that have been done either by PCF, either by NLC, Nonprofit Leadership Center, and others, there wasn't one, even in the recent survey, that specifically spoke to what's the genders in the CEO position. What are their backgrounds, ethnicities, things of that nature. But, there are some statistics that I think are really important when we look at some of the technical expertise that many of the safety organizations are looking at. So we know that women, for example, since we're minority owned, make up 75% of the jobs in the nonprofit industry. We know that women also dominate at least 80% in fundraising industry. We also know that the lead position in the finance industry are held by women. So we do have some statistics for where that comes from the AAUW to GuideStar in their 2017 study. We also know from the St. Pete Greenhouse that women make up a large subset in terms of economic growth, in terms of businesses in general. So I want to make sure I put that out there, not just nonprofits. And the reality is that the majority of nonprofits that we're seeing here in St. Pete that receive less than 1 million in operating revenue are run by females. 56% of them are women. It's less than $1 million. If it's over $1 million, 22% of those leaders are women. So I want to talk about that in one lens from that standpoint. I do think that's very important to understand that piece of it. Aside from that, we have a pretty deep bench strength. Regardless of what our visuals, these are our team leads that you see around you. Respectfully, within each team lead, if you talk about grants, we have 15 different grant writers. Okay, all different ages, all different ethnicities, all different touchstones who have written in every industry and nonprofits. If we look at the legal aspect, we have 300 different attorneys that we work with nationwide, not just in St. Pete. If we look at marketing, we have a team of 8. It's important for us to have a team lead, but we have deep bench strength for if something comes up today, or depending on the fact if somebody wants a particular type of individual. We look at our CPA lead, for example, who's a first generation Hispanic. If we have a client that has a need from that standpoint, that needs to be conversed with in Spanish, we have that. So I do think there's a shared lens from the standpoint of lived shared experiences. And our bench strength, our team, I think really reflects that, even though they can't all be here today. But I think also from the standpoint of what Eric said, we'll be walking alongside that journey with them, and who is the appropriate team that's going to do that. So I want to make sure that, I understand the minority owned question, but at the same time, we're going to have the ability, the expertise to walk alongside and pick the appropriate messenger from our team to work with that particular champions from the organization.
Additionally, our team, if you think about intersectionality and the multiple dimensions of diversity, with as broad and as deep as our team is, it's going to be pretty rare we're not going to be able to cover some of those particular elements. So it may be bringing someone that's been in a background doing a different role, bringing them up front in order to ensure that we have the proper kind of connectivity, the right kind of credible messenger to deliver the message, the right message at the right time. So again, we understand the intersectionality, we understand the multiple dimensions of diversity and how to bring those forward in order to have the right type of cultural acuity and understand the cultural nuances that can drive decision making, and also can drive mission, vision, values, and how those can change over time. Because as the data is going to show, the growth of the BIPOC community is outpacing the growth of the Black community when it comes to birth rates. So the idea of this is how are organizations changing? How are they addressing some of these pivots? That's just an example, but what do these things actually look like? And so having, having an open organization that can look at these different things in real time, be able to have some of those kind of conversations internally to ensure that we're meeting our organizations where they are, honoring those experiences, bringing forth the best possible opportunity for maximizing resources, engagement, and growth for our community.
And then the final question, number 7. While it is admirable that the makeup of the team is majority women, there's limited representation of people of color. How do you think this will affect your interactions with the nonprofits seeking assistance for this SSO?
So I'll take this one. The question in and of itself was a little bit struggle, it was a bit of a struggle because there's an implication that based upon what you saw, you made an assessment that it's not a majority of people or there's not enough. So part of the question is, what does that mean? So because since we are looking at a BIPOC community, you can't really look at someone based upon a picture or a last name or a surname and be able to assess who they are, what they are. So the idea of this is that we have, subject matter expertise within the space. We also know that the depths of our teams have many elements of dimensions of diversity, many elements that support intersectionality and how those components come together. And essentially, we have subject matter expertise in this entire work. So it's not a question of how can we handle it. It's the idea of we're not going to make the mistake of assuming anything. We're gonna take the chance of asking the proper questions to ensure that we're critically clear of who's in front of us, what their lived experiences are, and what the expectations are. If there's an expectation that you need to have someone that's multilingual, we'll be there. Is there an expectation that we want to have someone that you can interact with as a person with a disability? We'll be there. The idea of it is to ensure that through the assessment process and through the coaching process, to understand who's in front of us at all times, to be sure that we're engaging in a manner that is authentic, that again, and I'm going to continue to say this because I think this is really, really important, that understands and values lived experiences to ensure that we're getting the right kind of results. We're actually able to engage to ensure that there's a safe space for this interaction to occur, so we can get the right information at the right time to impact the organization in the best way possible. So the idea of it is, one, intersectionality, depth of the group that we have. We can bring forth the subject matter expertise that's needed in order to have authentic engagement, to be able to maximize the opportunities that are in front of with said organization, but also to be sure that lived experiences are upfront and that we're validating and understanding how that interacts or interplays with the organization's mission, vision, and values.
I just want to kind of put a little point on this question. If you look at our website, we don't have people as part of our team outside of the founder. And there's a reason for that. Because within every single conduit of what we do in our services, we have people of all ages, ethnicities, demographics, background, and industries that we can serve. We're happy to provide the visual, and visual was really quite frankly based on those from the team that have the experience and skill set that came from the study that was done by PCF, but also from the standpoint of who really knows the St. Petersburg community. So I just want to make sure that we're not confusing. We are majority women, although we did have 4 men on our team, so I want to kind of preface that. But at the same time, it's about getting the right person from our team that works with our clients. So putting forth the visual of who the team leads are the ones that are here today, are those that have the best fit, understand St. Petersburg, understand this community, have participated in incubator series, placed talent in this community. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, because that is reflected in all of our marketing materials. It's about finding the best fit versus what it looks like in this area.
Thank you.
And that's not to minimize. So when we looked at this, as like, this is the assumption is that you have the subject matter expertise, what you're going to be at the table. But the idea is, do you have a cultural fit to be able to service this particular community, which in many cases is the BIPOC community? And so simply stated, yes, because of all the reasons that we've stated here today. So kind of wrap this up, I know that minute. But another piece of this is really what Michelle said, it's relationships. If you understand the African American community in St. Petersburg, especially if they're native, if I know your mama's name and your daddy's name, I know your life history. And we have that kind of relationships because of the depth of our team within the city. We have people that are on the team that have been born and raised here for 4 generations. So those relationships are pervasive throughout the community. So just want to be, again, making sure that the understanding is that this is more of getting a feel for us as a team of subject matter experts coming together to service a community. And do we have the cultural expertise? Do we understand the cultural nuances? Are we willing to validate lived experiences to ensure that we can engage with the community in a very authentic, real, and safe manner that's going to dispel some of the myths that have been in engagement of this type before, but be able to step forward, step through in a manner that's going to allow us to really move the needle within this community. 4 seconds left.
That's like the final buzzer.
I know, right?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time to thoroughly answer the questions that the committee put forth. And then I will hand this back over to David.
Yes, so we have about 10 minutes left to the 45-minute chunk. We started at 9:50. So there's now time for open Q&A from the committee. If there are remaining questions around the proposal or the services that Academies could offer.
So I'd love to start.
And the 5-minute timer still stands. Yeah.
But not on us.
Right.
Say that because I want to frame the question carefully so that you have the opportunity to thoroughly answer it for us. One of the questions that continues to loom is many of these smaller organizations, and you talked about those that are have budgets under $1 billion. And I think many of those will end up being the target organizations are really working to get to where they need to be so that they can benefit from services like the ones that you're proposing to offer. We, as a committee, asked a question about what you would do or how you would reach those that didn't necessarily fit into the criteria that you initially laid out. And I don't know if I received a really clear answer. I know it's there. But if I received a really clear answer on how some of those, I'll say weaker or less prepared organizations will get in the door. I think you talked to us about some of the processes that you have once they are in. So help us understand better how those organizations that are not quite where they need to be yet, how they would actually get in the door initially.
And may I piggyback on that, because that was my question too, and I had a specific note about that. Because you all, in your answer, indicated leveraging existing relationships with funders, including Foundation for Health in Petersburg, and Phelps Community Foundation, which is excellent. And to Darla's point, many non-traditional grassroots small nonprofits are not funded by traditional institutions for all kinds of reasons. And so that, that stuck out to me as well. As how, and you mentioned, connecting with the community and influencers, and I'd like to specifically hear more about that piece of it.
Sure. So let me, I guess, start, and then if anybody else on our team would like to chime in, but I think there's various ponds that smaller nonprofits tend to fish in. I'm just gonna use that terminology. So if they, we work with clients from $100,000 budget to 87 million, they're all across the board for us, it's not a qualifier. They allow us to come in and implement real change, then we will absolutely work with them. But what I've found in my 30 years of experience is that, and where we find them, from whether we're working with the Shirley Proctor Foundation, which is really small, or the Kind Mouse here, which is really small and been a long-time client, the fact of the matter is they're going to places, number one, usually in an educational space. So whether it's a nonprofit leadership center, of which some of us are trainers for, there's that piece of it. Many of them are going to professional development in places like Foundation for Healthy St. Pete. They're going to places, whether it's Pinellas Community Foundation and certain segments of that nature. So there's a training element. Many of those small shops are going, and that's usually their first stop in terms of finding somebody. So our team, we've trained in various topics of what we represent. We're in those spaces, right, locally. So that's one way to get in front of them outside of a big marketing blitz, right? I mean, that's something that's affordable. The second one in terms of funders is we do work with a lot of clients on both sides of the bay, where when we're doing capacity building, for example, let's say strategic planning or governance training, we know who the funders are. We've worked with funders that have underwritten that. That have been JWB, I know some things have changed in the past, Children's Board in Hillsborough County, others that build capacity, Allegheny Franciscan, for example. So we're very familiar when we encounter a small client and they say, can you help us with strategic planning? When we talk about your timeline and budget, and we look at that, we know who the funders are in Pinellas County, and sometimes we're even asked to help them write a grant to fund our work, and we have done that in the past. So the funders is sort of that second place, which we talked about, right? Where they're going to get that help, get the financial help because they don't have that capacity. So to me, those are sort of two ponds where I think that's important. The third is the marketing. So it's not, yes, we're on Google, we're the number one nonprofit consulting firm in Tampa Bay. That's a ranking, if you look at that, that they wanted to search us. But I also think the partnerships that we have in terms of either being sponsors of professional education, reputations in the community and work we've done with various clients, boards that we serve on, for example, and making those types of investments in time, treasure, talent is sort of that third piece that aside from any brochures, website, collateral materials, if we're selected, that we can proactively do as we articulated in the application. Part of that is just going to be connecting those communication channels. So that's why you'll notice in the budget, we could come up with a huge communication budget to reach them. But in my experience, where these smaller nonprofits are going, or number one, usually education locations, which is a space that we are in and have. And we do provide education, whether it be virtual or in person. Secondly, with the funders. And that's what I'm seeing. And that's what I also saw today when we did the, listen to the survey results. And we had many small nonprofits there and talking about what they were looking at. How do you introduce this to corporations, for example, that can help us with funding, grant funders? How do you help us with mergers if we need to merge with a business and so forth? So knowing where they go, because that's what they can afford when they need help funding, in my opinion, and I'm hoping that this answers your question and as I envision, that's where we find them, aside from the marketing piece.
If you don't mind, I'd like to also add to that, is that all of us have at least a decade of experience, if not 20, 30 years working in our nonprofit community here in St. Petersburg in the greater Tampa Bay area. I would say that the majority of the clients I serve have a budget under $1 million. I have clients as small as $10,000 annual budget. We're constantly directly interacting with not only these staff leads, but the board of directors, attending these meetings, talking to these stakeholders. A lot of these staff people on the board of directors are serving and working with other nonprofits in the area. So as we're doing our work, not just in the SSO, but in our other meetings, we are going to have the power of word of mouth to be sharing that information with the staff, with the boards that are working with these smaller grassroots organizations to tell them of the resources that we have available. So it's not just traditional means of marketing for some of these bigger organizations. With the connections and clients we're already serving and our reputation of growing by referral, we're going to be able to spread that word to be able to get in front of those that might not be in the educational spaces or might not receive the traditional funding. Is it our large end strength?
That's it. So we have about 2 minutes left. If there's a quick question with a quick answer, we can go ahead and ask. Well then, okay. So thank you for joining us. This is still an open meeting, so you're welcome to stay for the next portion. We're going to take about a 15-minute break. We'll start up again at 10:50. And then with the FHA collaborative. So thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you.
So that's my background. I've been in for a while, worked on the CRA parts of it, and got dragged back into nonprofit work by Will Crowley. For those of you who don't know him, he's a Black gentleman who sued the Board of Ed for discrepancies in terms of funding, and he was trying to do a Black chamber rebuild it. So that's how I got dragged back in, and here we are.
Hi, my name is Dr. Lindsay Grove. I'm the CEO of the Amphithea Collaborative. My background is in public health, but it's also in nonprofit consulting. And I'm really excited to be here today.
My name is Beatrice Farrell. I'm the Chief Community Officer. I have been, I started my career as a commercial lender, transitioned into nonprofit work. Have worked for community-based nonprofit for about 10 years and recently transitioned to working on a digital inclusion project and Hypatia Collaborative.
Great, take it away.
All right, so we don't need to reintroduce ourselves. They were all here for the All right, so you know how this works. Thank you again for all of the time and effort in preparing the grant application for this. We appreciate that, and thank you for allowing us this second part of the application. As we said previously, the questions are a compilation of what all the committee members have put together. I'm simply reading and presenting them to you on their behalf. And so let's begin. Number one, can you provide a better understanding of what you anticipate the day-to-day client user experience would be once the plan is in place?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. So once the plan is in place, the client should anticipate consistent communication.
Sorry.
Oh.
I'm gonna say it's not.
Oh. Okay, all right, so once the plan's in place, we anticipate that the client will receive consistent communication from the Hypatia team as well as vendors. And those vendors are a part of our collaborative network. And really, it's just to check in with them, make sure that the comprehensive plan that everyone's agreed upon, that we're meeting the benchmarks that we've set forth. And also to just check in on them. You know, one of the biggest things that we think is important is building a community and really making sure that people feel supported. You know, I know that for a lot of nonprofits, you know, they feel very isolated, especially small ones where they're really struggling with finding resources in the community. And we know that being able to create an environment where they feel that they trust that they can collaborate with the folks that, you know, not only reflect their lived experience, but also have the knowledge and skill set to be able to provide the services, you know, we've set forth in their plan, right? So just to give you an example, you know, let's say we have a small nonprofit who, you know, needs some grant writing. They're probably all going to need grant writing, but maybe they also need some strategic planning and some financial management. So for a day-to-day experience, it might be them working with our CPA as a part of our network, you know, reviewing their 990s, making sure they're submitted on time, going over their budget that their board is, you know, approved, but also looking at where they are in the actual to budget, or I should say their projected budget, and also just, you know, helping them set up accounting software, reviewing their current accounting. They might not have a bookkeeper. It might be the executive director also fills that role. I mean, we're talking about extremely small nonprofits. Also, this could mean working with a grant writer. So we want to make sure that our grant writers are not only researching and finding really good fits for funding opportunities, but also working with them to build boilerplate language, to make sure that they've got some sort of documentation and filing system in place. If you all have done grants, you know that it's not just the writing part, it's making sure you've got the right documents. And a lot of times it's an investigative process to make sure you've got all the documents you need. And lastly, the strategic planning piece of this would be working with their board. You know, that might mean reaching out to board members, reaching out to staff, providing them with, you know, some points of contact to do a SWOT analysis, you know, reviewing their board governance documents, including bylaws. So a lot of this is going to be really hands-on, but we also want to make sure we're not disrupting the work that they're doing, because that is foremost the, you know, the thing that we want them to do. We want to be able to provide them the support to make sure that they're able to actually focus on their mission. You know, that's one of the things that was really important to us when we started building the shared services organization model in 2019 is we see really small nonprofits that are wearing multiple hats. They might have one executive director, but they're also the bookkeeper and they're also the program director and they're also the marketing person. So it's really hard when you have to focus on the business of running a nonprofit to actually do your mission driven work. So that's really what we want to do. We want to be helpful, we want to be supportive, but we also want to make sure we're not disruptive and we're also building confidence in them to eventually leave us, right? So anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, the part about not stifling, I think was directed to me is a lot of nonprofits, they just want a cup of water. Right, they have a thirst that they have to quench, they're overwhelmed, they don't have any budget, they're nowhere near $250,000 a year to be sustainable, they're lucky if they can get to 20 or 25 and go beyond the postcard. And as Elizabeth pointed out, I mean, I'll sit there and say, great, you want to do affordable housing, well, here's mitigation bank, here's the CRA stuff, as Elizabeth pointed out, we need to work with folks where they are, right? We need to take the wrench and open the fire hydrant and overwhelm somebody, so we're very conscious of we call it SWOT analysis, I call it WAN, where we do it wants, abilities, needs, but that's what's missing, and then a design for success, right? And so, our goal is, if you've seen the movie Star Wars, and you see the part where Harrison Ford plays Han Solo, and he turns around and said, "Not bad for a little furball." That's what we want the folks that come through this to be. We want them to be more than confident when they ask for money, more than ready to successfully help stabilize and grow St. Petersburg.
Thank you. And so, number 2, how will the referral process be structured? As a warm handoff, where clients are scheduled like working with a single entity, or will clients be required to do their own follow-up with each individual donor? I'm sorry, vendor.
Hopefully it will be done. Do you wanna?
So the way that we'll do the referral process is, my primary role is to, one of my primary roles is to identify the nonprofits that are in need of our services. And they will start the process with us with a nonprofit needs assessment. And once we complete the nonprofit needs assessment, then we start the process of connecting them with the vendor that will be their the primary contact.
Right, and we think that it's really important, especially when, this is a completely new process for a lot of small nonprofits. So we do believe in a warm handoff. We want to make sure that the connection is made. And there will definitely be follow-up, and that's why we've built into our budget a client services coordinator, somebody that can check in on both clients and vendors to make sure that not only has the referral been made, but that the plan that everyone's agreed upon is being implemented the way it's supposed to be. This is a part of our evaluation process, but it's also just to make sure that our nonprofit has a point person to make sure that things are going smoothly. One of the other things too is that, once the nonprofit needs assessment is made and then a comprehensive plan is put together for the nonprofit client, we want to make sure that, when we're starting to make referrals out to our vendors, that they put together a scope report. This will help us forecast our budget. We don't want to go crazy as much as we probably love to. But we also, want to make sure that it makes sense. We want to make sure that we are not only implementing these plans with fidelity, but we're doing it as good stewards of the funds that we've been given. So as a part of that process, the client will have full transparency. They'll have access to that information. We really truly believe that trust is the biggest piece of doing the shared services organization. And so transparency is a part of that, right? Ensuring that the client sees the scope of work, they'll obviously see the resume and information about the vendor that they'll be working with. They'll have access to all of their data, just because, again, we're all in this together. That's why we call ourselves a collaborative, because it is truly collaborative.
Lindsay, Dr. Grove didn't mention that the client actually will select the vendor that they work with. So we'll make sure that there's introductions between clients and our vendor collaborative so that people select to work with a vendor that they feel more comfortable.
Good. Anything else? No, thank you. Number 3. How will you maintain a similar ethic and model of service across all vendors pertaining to communication timelines, client respect, diversity training, and billing practices?
Great question. We plan to build a standardized orientation for both vendors and clients, where one of our collaborative partners is Merit, which is an online nonprofit capacity building platform. So they provide both professional development and they allow for organizations like us to be able to provide custom training. But we also want to be able to provide that in person. We know online isn't best for everybody. And again, we want to meet people where they're at. In that training, we will definitely include our communication and evaluation timelines. As we stated in the application, we're taking a participatory approach to evaluation. So it's not just a team of evaluators that are evaluating the project, it's everybody. So, again, we'll make sure that we'll let them know, hey, this is when we're having professional development opportunities. This is when we're going to have, just networking events where we all get to know each other and hang out. Because again, we want to build community as a part of this nonprofit ecosystem. And, we have to teach them how to use the database, right? We want to build a custom database that allows for both clients and vendors to interact, whether that's with billing, whether that's so that they can track their progress and do, project management, looking at their implementation plan, doing the evaluation piece. So whether that's sending surveys, redoing the needs assessment again to make sure that we're looking at, a longitudinal progress. We will also make sure to include client vendor responsibilities, because again, this isn't just us providing services, right? This has to be an agreement, it's a partnership between us and the client. We also will definitely include, this is a key piece, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion training. We have multiple consultants as a part of our collaborative network that can help us build a really comprehensive Jedi training, another Star Wars reference. So, we think that that's extremely important, and we have folks on our team already that are busting at the seams to do that. So we're really excited. And the billing practices, right? We want to make sure that the scope of work makes sense, that folks are, not only turning their invoices in on time, but we also want to make sure that we are able to look at that data, right? How many of our nonprofits are using grant writing services? How many of our nonprofits are using financial management? That's going to help us plan for the future. It's also going to give us some really good data points to better understand what the needs of our client base is. And maybe we could even project that out into the community as well.
And we have a second here. So, so an example, we're stewards of this money, right? So, should we spend the money, or is it smarter for us to take a struggling nonprofit and say, an example, use some other service that's out there? An example is volunteers management, right? There are a lot of local organizations and even federal funding that's supposed to go to the neighborhoods. And what happens is these volunteers end up going to hospices and other safer neighborhoods. And so, so a lot of organizations, they get exponential impact because they can tap into a volunteer system, right? So, could we, we're going to go to the small groups and say, look, you don't have a budget, but there's folks from court system. There's someone up in Leelman that uses the volunteers to put on their $990 as revenue, right? So they can get above a threshold. They only have $15,000 a year. They show $100,000. So Foundation for Health, same people put out a request, and you had to be $50,000 and above. That wasn't $50,000 cash. So you have a lot of small organizations that have some volunteers, right? But they don't book it properly. But we could do volunteer management, handbook, onboarding, but there's a company that does it for $39 a month, right? It does the basics. It'll have it all in there for you. So do you, maybe you want to choose that we do it for you. You want to have a handbook. You want to have someone holding your hand, because as Beatrice said recently in a meeting, this is not difficult. but it's unknown and uncomfortable for a lot of folks, so they don't have that experience, right? So the key is, do we spend the money internally, which they may want to handle, or do we say, hey, $39 a month, try it out for 6 months? Right? We don't really need that part of our service for this piece, right? Now come back 6 months and, even training with software, you'd rather have a physical book where you do tasks, obligations, intake, onboarding, that's fine. So that's how we're going.
Thank you. So, number 4. Will the database also function for client internal use? And if so, can it be built so clients will be able to use and benefit from their own data at the end of the project period? For instance, built on a platform that is easily used and available and transferable to clients.
The answer is yes. We are working with a local technology database builder called Fetch Data. And they are all about using human-centered design around building databases. One of the things that we talked about, and I know we'll talk about a little bit later around financial sustainability, is that, as a researcher, I see so many nonprofits put their blood, sweat, and tears into providing data to not just funders, but even academic institutions as a part of partnerships. And they don't really get anything in return, right? There's got to be a better way to share power and share capital in those kinds of situations. And we think that this is what's really important in this piece, is making sure that clients not only have access to their own data, but they own it. And if other institutions want access to it, they will have to pay for it. That's a way that we can leverage capital to help with paying for services for these nonprofits. And we know that data is really powerful. In fact, the SSO has the opportunity to essentially create an entire data set that we could aggregate and get really rich information to help inform policy, to help inform not just how we do things internally, but maybe how funders decide to fund and provide resources in the community. So long story short, yes, the database will definitely be available for client internal use. And we plan on using QuickBase, which is a really common database builder. Fetch uses QuickBase. And as we build the actual database, we will be getting input from vendors and clients to make sure that it makes sense for everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So number 5, please provide clarity and specifics about how you will prepare for long-term sustainability.
Sure. Well, I guess that leads in. Okay, so again, many organizations, like especially large organizations like universities and large private foundations, again, collect data and they promise, that there's going to be significant change. The SSO could use our shared metrics. So if we've got multiple clients that work on, let's say, child literacy, that's a data set, especially for small nonprofits that are working in hard to reach, historically underserved communities. That's a really valuable data set that could be used as leverage to, say, hey, if you want access to this, then, what tangibly are we going to get in return for that? And, part of this too, I believe in the democratization of knowledge as much as anyone else, but I also believe that, there's an opportunity here to do some really significant power sharing in the community. Another avenue that we plan on pursuing is actually working with funders. We think that if we can say, hey, allow us to help maybe grantees that didn't get the grant because the grant application was weak, or maybe they didn't have the administrative capacity to actually administer the grant, they could actually contract with us to help minimize the risk for a funder to fund a specific program if capacity is the issue, right? And that could be a way to generate revenue for the SSO itself. We're also developing paid service packages for folks that want to pay for services. We know that there has to be both, right? We think that there are, and we've done some data work on this. there are small nonprofits out there that actually have a sizable budget. They might be small in staff that could actually really use our services. And those could really help subsidize the services for folks that really need access to free direct services. And our hope is that our clients that come in getting free direct services are able to graduate to paid services. We want them to get to the point where they might just need us for paid services and then maybe they don't need us at all. I think a lot of the work that we do in the nonprofit sector is about working ourselves out of a job, right? You know, we don't do this because, you know, sure, I want to pay my bills, but I also want to make sure that, you know, we're working towards actually changing equity issues in our community, actually addressing, you know, the disparities that we see. So our hope is that eventually they don't need us and that we can continue to bring more people in and they can graduate out.
15 more seconds. So CodeBox is in the building, right? So their business model, CodeBox is, they tell you, we'll do free training for you, we'll guarantee you a job. But their way of paying for the revenue is that they take the money as a job placement company, right? So they'll take 20 to 40% off of that. And there are some nonprofits locally that do that. They do some training and they'll get funding, but they'll get additional revenue from getting paid for the placement of the individuals. One of the things that we hope to induce some of the local nonprofits is to create a system that, and again, we can't oppose it, but we're gonna say, hey, this is working in other parts of the country. I have Chief Innovation Officer. This is what's happening in other places. Maybe you should think about doing this. So you set up a system where maybe it's not free, right? Maybe you make them pay 20 bucks, because we know that sometimes free doesn't induce a person to finish what you're starting. But us, maybe we could share in terms of revenue, we'll share with the nonprofit for the first couple of years that process. We'll help with the administration. So that's another piece of revenue that can come in, right? So there's other little pieces. I'm not gonna have enough time for all of it, but we gamed it out, you know, maybe after 6 months, we start saying, look, we only have 30 people, but we have 100 people that want this, right? So go to somebody else, go outside, the Ford Foundation in New York, that does social justice type of issues like this, maybe convince the Walmart Foundation if it doesn't take unrequested funds. And you know, we need $250,000 to give it out all the time, this would help. So we think that once the model is in place for about 6 months, we can aggressively start saying, hey, more or less this works, and we think that you know, there's more funding that can make it better.
In the end, we want to build capacity of both happy and especially with our nonprofit clients.
Thank you. Thank you. Number 6. Could you please provide details on the specific marketing strategies and channels your organization intends to use to promote and raise awareness about your services within the target communities?
That's mine. All right, so whether you ask when you go to the IRS databases, you go to Cause IQ and Melissa data, there's about 1,000 to 1,500 active 501c3 organizations in the actual city of St. Petersburg, top to bottom, excluding schools and churches. Now, some of those are here because a board member is here. There's a big Asian organization that their secretary of their board happens to be here. So the IRS data, because that's what you want the mail to come to, calls it a St. Pete organization, and they're multi-million-dollar organization, but it's not. You've got a couple of 501c3s set up as foundation group by some rich folks on South Beach Drive, but they're not from here. So they sort of run their own organization. They haven't set up a donor advised fund. You know, they're running it. And so they're not really, you might ask them for some money locally, but you know, they're not really there. So we'll filter some of that out. But even at 1,500, we can send out postcards maybe 3 times. And that would cost about $1 each. So for $5,000, we literally blanket everybody 3 times. In addition to that, we're going to go through Sunbiz and review. Once we do the mail outs, we'll see who hasn't responded. And we're going to probably set up a landing page where they can say, hey, tell me more. Right? So we set up a responder type scenario, go through some questions. Then we're going to go to Sunbiz and go to board members, right? Run database checks that are out there, phone numbers, etc. And you know, for those who didn't contact us, maybe do LinkedIn search, right? And so we might do a voicemail drop with the service that's out there, and that might cost another $3,000. So we covered the organization 3 times, we've got board members a few times, and Yeah, then me, I've been in sales, I've been in sales training, so it's gonna fall on me, you know, for those who haven't, I'm just gonna cold call. Right, I'm just gonna knock on their door 3-4 times, in the sales, it's, you know, till they buy or till they die, right? So, you know, we're gonna keep pounding away. The biggest problem we think we're gonna have, because we've been here so long locally, is who are the 20, 30, 40 people that we help in the first year? Because I know we're gonna have folks that we know we're gonna be disappointed. Now, how do we work that for them? There's a lot of, you know, we're gonna curate, and have a bespoke and, concierge type scenario. So there might be folks that say, hey, look, you know, here's some inexpensive, training pieces online. You know, we can't get you in the first wave, but here's the stuff you can do to learn online. And maybe we'll have some a few times a year for you. So maybe on paper, we only help 30 aggressively in one form or another, and that might be something to the effect of like helping you with sponsorships. You do something on the weekends, right? You complain, oh my God, how come this organization that was a 5K program, they got 10 corporate sponsors, they got 300 people there, we've got thousands of people every weekend, and we can't do it. But that's a process. It's no different than asking for a grant. Corporations want sponsorship as marketing, right? So again, there's data points that you have to add. There's databases where they have the exact name of the person, how much money they're going to spend, how much advance notice they need. So we can help these small organizations in the course of time fill in some of the funding, because the reality is we're going to have some folks that just want to do weekend stuff. They don't want to go to work. They want to fill in that space. So let's see. That's it. Yes, that's you, because as we said, I'm
So, I mean, we're also going to table at nonprofit events to talk about our services and interface with individuals that way. The three of us have worked in the community for a significant amount of time. And so we have contacts and individuals that we work with. So the fact, if we are awarded, what we'll do is let everybody know, and then we'll always ask people that, okay, so tell 2 or 3 of your friends. Because nonprofits know each other about the services that we have. Ooh, I thought I said one.
No. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, we did outline this in the application about, you know, using our vendor networks. We really were intentional in how we put together our collaborative network. We wanted to make sure that there were folks that are reflective of the community, lots of different types of communities here in St. Pete. And we know that they have folks that they work with that might need additional support that they just can't afford right now, right? We have lots of great relationships with our local funders. Asking them, hey, did you have some folks that you were like, oh, I wish I could have funded them, but you know, they just needed a little extra. Could you help them maybe, you know, provide some additional support? We also are involved, and our vendors are involved with, you know, coalitions of nonprofit organizations. Really, the basis of this is that we've built trust in the community. People know who we are, they know who our vendors are in our network. And we think that that'll be the basis of our marketing.
We're allowed to go over, right? So no, okay, see, everyone's gonna, I'm the hybrid guy, right?
Yeah.
Slow me down. Yes.
Thank you. And finally, number 7. Of the 3 testimonials you provided, is Cultured Books the only nonprofit that has benefited from the organization's services? The other 2 testimonials read as general letters of support.
That's a great question. So we included Cultured Books because they have been served by actually Beatrice and also Carriage House Consulting, which is one of our vendors in the collaborative network. The Clearwater Urban Leadership Coalition, they actually get direct services through Hypatia, so I apologize if that wasn't clear. Hypatia recently got a $50,000 ARPA grant from the city of Clearwater to do exactly what we're requesting money for today, which is providing small nonprofits in the Greenwood redevelopment area with grant writing, strategic planning. So it's a really small pilot. And the Warehouse Arts District was also served by Carriage House Consulting. We just wanted to provide you with some examples of folks who've been served by not just Hypatia, but folks that are in the vendor network.
For example, Dr. Grove mentioned Clearwater Urban Leadership Coalition. We actually did the 501c3. So that was part of the work that we did in order to get them to the point so that they could apply for the ARPA grant. And they were, we assisted in that process and they were awarded.
175,000.
Yeah, so I mean, part of it is assisting people who need, the very, very first step is to do the 501c3. So, and we don't know, I mean, we have more testimonials that we can read you. I don't know if we have the time to do that, but when we saw the email, we're like, oh, we thought the COC letter and water letter was sufficient. So we did some outreach. So if you'd like for me to read some more, I can, if you like.
Is the question, have we helped other nonprofits, or do you want specifically, do you want us to list the nonprofits? The problem is that there was only extra so many pages on the proposal. And so we had to make a decision to what we put in there. Perfect example, Second Chance Life Skills is well known. It's this purple building on 1700 South 34th. I worked with the organization intimately, helped them work with a donor advised fund to get money to finish their roof on the work they were doing, which is one of the things we're gonna hopefully help other nonprofits understand that there's foundations, sorry guys, and then there's donor advised funds inside, which are really many foundations inside, and a nonprofit, you know, not be afraid to ask and talk to money. So you can talk to donor advised fund person directly, and that'll go completely outside the scope, sorry guys, of how you get your funding, right?
But
So,
to answer your
Yeah.
question, do you want a list of other nonprofits? Do you want some more testimonials? Because
how do you want us to answer this question?
So let me further add a brief clarity to the question. I think was being asked was simplistically, are there other specific nonprofits
Yes.
that you have supported?
Yes.
Yeah, do you want us to list
Names,
them?
just name them.
Should we go ahead and get the names, or shall we have them forwarded at another time?
Yeah, we've got letters.
Yeah.
We can do.
We haven't entertained really modifying the application before.
Okay.
But I think examples,
Yeah, we can give
verbal
examples.
examples,
So we got some
With-
testimonials.
with the disclaimer that we can follow up to verify.
Okay, so we have 2 minutes.
I'm sorry, not testimonials, just the
The
list.
name,
of
those are people we know.
nonprofits.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine.
Maybe Nature Services.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
That's
fine.
fine.
Okay.
Keys, list them.
You want us to go through
Yeah,
that? Sure.
Keys for Life, Inc., Marie Scott is the owner. Providence Group International, which is owned by Dr. Keisha Benson. Keys of the Universe, Latricia Alley. She Totally Wins, Kenyatta Rucker. Centertown Community All Stars. Shawanda Bell, I'm trying to.
Say it a little louder, and somebody.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carrie.
And generally speaking, the kind of work that you do with these nonprofits, I think is what the question
Yeah.
is asking.
We have assisted in forming their 501c3s. We have assisted in strategic support.
Okay.
And we also, a lot of these nonprofits were actually partners with us when we were initially applying for a really large grant to fund the SSO in 2020. It was through the WK Kellogg Foundation as a part of the Ignite the Deuces project. So I can name a couple of others too. Actually through CULC, we've been helping the Willa Carson Health and Wellness Center. These are folks that are obviously in the Clearwater redevelopment area. We've helped the family, we're starting to work with them, or we're starting to work with the Family Enrichment Services Organization. Most of this has been strategic planning and grant writing. We've also provided some, we're providing help with 501c3 applications for the North Greenwood Life Changers, and this is a group that's focused on returning citizens. As far as other people that we've helped, we've worked with lots of folks in the Deuces area.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the Safety Business League, I know we got a few seconds. I'm a big advocate of the Community Investment Act. It's not really ignited here locally. I'll give you an example. Valley National was buying the same, sorry. Anyway, the bottom line is that Mr.
Sorry.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, so, I mean. We're gonna, Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left out of this, so we started at about 10:50, and so we have until 11:35. If there are further questions you all want to ask, then the 5-minute slots.
So you spoke a little bit or a fair bit about data, and establishing or refining the database for the use of the nonprofit clients to use for their data gathering purposes, it sounds like, but then for you all on the SSO side, to take that data as a set and to share that with institutions like funders, educational institutions, this is a clarifying question. And monetize that in some way.
Right,
Because
with the permission of our clients, right?
of course, and
Yeah.
so the vision is to get funders on board with paying for this data to inform their practices, or
Yeah.
other institutions using funders as an example. I'm just clarifying that that is the sort of aspirational vision of, and how, so if that's true, how aspirational, can you speak to where you all are in that process? Because I know that's part of your sustainability plan.
Sure, yeah.
And so tangibly, I guess the question is that aspirational, or are there clear steps toward moving toward that being a sustainable model opportunity? Does that make sense?
I would say that,
Before, I'm sorry, before you answer that, I just want to tag to the end of that,
Yeah.
so that you're clear on the question. Is there a prototype of a database to that end already in place, or are we starting at ground zero?
that's a great question. So the reason why we chose Fetch Data is because they already do a very similar database to what we're trying to do. It's called the Jackson Care Hub. It's out of Jackson, Michigan. And this is more integrated for for healthcare. So they work with the local healthcare organization, which is part of the Henry Ford healthcare system, to make referrals to the community for patients. And so they have, and their whole referral process is based on addressing the social determinants of health. So we felt like that was sort of similar to what we're trying to do, is we're trying to take this really robust group of collaborative vendors and make these referrals based on, a whole set of nonprofit needs, data points, as well as just, sitting down with the nonprofit and asking them, like, what are the things you're doing well? What are your goals? And also looking at their, 990 data, that kind of thing. So there's not a prototype specifically for the database that we're planning to do, but there are models that are very similar, which is why we chose to work with Fetch.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I think what Dr. Grove mentioned was if we're gonna approach this as a democracy, so Hypatia collects the data. And if we're looking at outside funding sources, it's ultimately for the benefit of our clients.
Yes.
So we're not going to collect the data just for us. It's to ensure that our nonprofits that provided the data get a benefit of sharing that data with larger organizations, whether that is in terms of grant funding, whether it's in terms of other types of support with these business relationships. But we're still going to be sharing our information with the clients that provided it.
So one of the pieces I can now segue in, the Community Reinvestment Act, which has nothing to do with community development areas. The Community Reinvestment Act function or dysfunctions based on the input from the local community and the needs assessment. What I noticed here in the Tampa Bay Area, generally in St. Pete, is that the one specific organization that does affordable housing, everyone's been able to hide under their skirt and not interact as they're required by law with little furball, like I said, folks that are smaller and boots on the ground, which in most of the country, that's what happens. So if we've got 30, 40, 50 folks in 2 levels, the data of the needs assessment now gets put in the public file of each and every financial institution, triggering a legal requirement for them to put more money in the neighborhoods. So we can get paid and our clients can get paid from that data and can interact with the banks and usually have 3 levels of funding. They've got their Community Investment Act funding. They usually have a foundation and they also have a grant.
For one second.
Yeah. Sorry. Sorry, about that. I'm also half Greek and that's our pointer finger. My apologies. So in terms of monetizing it, in terms of the Community Investment Act, not only can we get paid by banks for this data, we can also help small organizations ignite more funding that's legally required and happens all over the rest of the country, but here locally is squashed down because most local small organizations don't understand the process of putting a letter in the public file. You know, a homeless person will walk into a bank and say, I want to see this paperwork, I don't have to put a letter in the file, you're not providing enough money for homeless people, because I'm homeless, right? The feds, that triggers stuff. An example of the value of the Community Investment Act, St. Pete Business League, Will Crowley, we filed a objection to Valley National Bank purchasing this other bank that was out of Chicago that I bumped heads with years ago in Chicago, politically owned family. And even though we only wrote a specific, very short objection, the Federal Reserve forced Valley National Bank to have what's called a private memorandum understanding, and they couldn't grow anymore until they fixed the problem. So how does that manifest itself? During COVID, Mr. Brayboy on 22nd Street was basically being redlined. And he basically said, I can't even get my application in, they're refusing to help me. The president of Valley National Bank saw that as the opportunity to try to break that private memorandum. He personally got his folks to go knock on the door, Mr. Brayboy. He got him the $100,000 or $150,000 to keep his door open. And then the Federal Reserve, looking at me, said, yeah, that's good. And I said a few nice things on LinkedIn, and then they're allowed to murder. It's the banking union. So that's the value of the Community Investment Act. It's not being used well, and we'll figure that out.
Thank you.
So. We have 3 minutes left. If there's any quick question and quick answer. I'm not gonna answer. She's gonna answer. There you go.
I have just a really quick question about the database.
Yeah.
So from a nonprofit, a small nonprofit perspective, the 3 areas that I would find helpful to have a database would be our service, we're providing services to how many people, what are,
Yes.
that impact. A database that would help us to keep up with like a CRM donor, and then also similarly, grant funding and making sure that all of our benchmarks are met and everything like that. Would that database cover those 3
Yes,
areas?
absolutely. We want to make sure that we're building something that is useful to small nonprofits. Because we know, and that might look like it'll be integrated with something like Asana, for project management. But again, we want to work with small nonprofits to get that kind of feedback. Because again, they might not have the funds to be able to, to purchase a CRM, but I mean, that's the whole purpose of a shared services organization, right? We want to be able to share resources amongst not just our vendors, but also amongst clients, so that we're kind of getting the best bang for our buck. And also, if we work together, we actually have a lot more power to leverage, for grant opportunities. I mean, I can certainly see funders being really interested in having a portfolio of small nonprofits to say, hey, you've got this entire portfolio of nonprofits, we could give you a significant amount of money, knowing that they all have the operational administrative support that they need to administer it. And it could be, reinvested in even adding more features onto the database to meet their needs.
Okay, so only a minute left. I don't know. Everyone okay with wrapping up? Great, okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for being here. I also want to thank the City of St. Pete. We have some members from there joining us. This was their brainchild to kind of path this through PCF and then onto RFP process. So thank you to the City of St. Pete and to the PCF team. I also want to give a shout out to Jocelyn, our Senior Program Officer, who's joining us remotely. The whole team has been instrumental in making this happen. And the applicants in committee. I think everyone in this room knows how the potential in this and the importance of this. And so I just want to thank everyone for seeing that and honoring that. So next steps tomorrow at 10 a.m. we'll all join again virtually by Zoom for actual deliberations to start. We asked the committee not talk to each other about this in the next 24 hours, just to respect sunshine and kind of having everything be public and transparent. And applicants can attend as well. We will have a Q&A format tomorrow. It'll be 3 minutes. for questions and answers. And those are, again, any remaining doubts on specific applications.
Can you provide a Q&A for committee to ask?
Yes, yes. And so attendance is not required tomorrow, but highly encouraged in case there are any more questions.
I'll make room.
So that wraps it up. We'll try to send a recording of this out this afternoon in case any party wants to review and prepare for tomorrow. Great.
Thank you all so much. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.